Good morning, Sanctuary. I want to start this morning by letting you know that for the next few weeks, we're going to take a break from studying Revelation to do a couple of different things, actually. During one of the weeks, probably next week, assuming we can get all the technology to work, we're going to do a special all worship service. So Tony and the worship team are going to record a number of songs for us, keeping 6 feet apart from one another, of course. And then we're going to intersperse that with some scriptures, communion, and some special announcements. So I think that's going to be a really great thing, really fun, hopefully help us all to feel a little more connected. And then for the other 3 weeks, I'm going to do a short series on stewardship. Now, stewardship simply means being given the job of taking care of something, such as an organization or property. In church circles, the word is usually used to describe the ways in which we as Christians recognize that everything we have, our time, our talents, our finances, all of it, is not really ours, but is entrusted to us by God, who is the true owner of everything. Now that means that we're going to spend at least some of that time talking about money and about giving as an offering to God from what we've received. Now that might make some of you uncomfortable. I know it makes me uncomfortable as a pastor. It probably says something that I was willing to do 2/3 of a 30+ week series on Revelation, one of the most notoriously difficult books of the Bible, before spending 3 weeks talking about money. But I'm going to do it because at the end of the day, stewardship/giving/financial faithfulness is a vitally important topic that I believe all pastors should preach on. Not because the church needs money, but because giving is a key aspect of discipleship. Just like worship or obedience or grace, the way Christians handle money has a deep impact on how fully we become more and more like Jesus. But let me make this clear from the start. My intention is not to make anyone feel guilty or pressured to give money to Sanctuary. My goal is to teach you what I believe the Bible teaches about giving, and then to allow you and God to work out what that means for you. You see, we're all at different places with this, and I believe that God welcomes us into the conversation from wherever we are, and then invites us to grow from that place. So if you hear these messages and come away thinking, honestly, God, I'm grateful for what you've given me, but I don't sense that you're calling me to do anything different than what I'm already doing, that's great, that's fine, I trust you. And if you hear these messages and then feel led to sponsor a child through World Vision, that's great too, that would be a wonderful outcome. It's also possible that you'll feel a tug in your heart, hopefully from the Spirit, from God, to increase the amount that you give to Sanctuary. And I'm not going to discourage that either. If that's what God is calling you to do that. But please hear me, that is not my primary goal in preaching this series. I'm preaching this series because it's been an area of my discipleship that I've struggled with over the years, and that the struggle itself has led to a lot of growth in my life. And so that's my hope and my prayer for each of us, that we would lean in during these next few weeks with open minds and sensitive hearts and wrestle with a sensitive topic and talk about it with other believers and grow closer to Jesus in the process. And now that I've made the lengthy disclaimer/introduction, let's get started. So I'd like to begin by telling you 2 different stories, both of which involve me giving gifts to family members. So the first story goes like this. The year was 1994. Christmas was approaching, and my brother's birthday as well, just a few days before on December 22nd. I was 12 years old and a super huge nerd. Star Trek: The Next Generation was my life. I've got photo proof of it. So my parents gave me some money to buy presents for my brother and other family members because I was 12 and didn't have any money, and then took me to the store. And as I'm walking through the store, I have no idea what I'm going to get my brother because I'm 12 and my world is just all me. He was 3 years older than me, and though we got along really well, we had, by that point in time, very different interests. And so I'm walking through the store and then I see it. Star Trek The Next Generation Game of the Galaxies. It was a Star Trek board game. Now, had I known it existed, I would have put it on my Christmas wish list because it sounded like the most awesome thing in the world. I love board games and I love Star Trek, so how could it go wrong? But at this point, we were just a couple days before my brother's birthday, only a few more days before Christmas, and I knew it was too late to ask for it myself. But I wanted it. Now, you can probably guess where this is going. I bought my brother the game. Not because he wanted it. I mean, sure, I rationalized it by saying that he and I like to play board games together, so it was sort of like a gift for both of us. But really, I got it because I wanted it, and I hoped that he would play it with me. Now, to add insult to injury, I also made it a combined birthday Christmas gift for him, which I did pretty much every year, and have been trying to do better. So my brother, who often listens to my sermons, Adam, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. So anyway, when Christmas came, he opened it, and because he's a good brother, he feigned interest and politely thanked me, which I think was actually really heroic on his part. But I remember, even on that day, trying to get him excited about it and realizing in that moment that I had made a mistake, that I'd been incredibly selfish. So that game sat on the shelf in my parents' basement for probably 20 years. And I'm not sure that we ever once played it. I think we opened the box once and looked at it, and then we're like, maybe not. Second story. Several years later, my brother and I were both in high school, and we were at a family reunion at our uncle's house, and we watched, stunned, as our mom and dad got super competitive playing a game of ping pong. They'd found a ping pong table in my uncle's house and started playing, and it was intense. And my brother and I, we really didn't know that our mom, who was usually pretty quiet and reserved, we didn't know she could get that competitive. We didn't know she could have fun like that. And I remember on the drive home listening to my parents talk in the front seat about how much they missed playing the game. Turns out that they used to play against each other when they were dating in high school, and wondering if maybe they should think about getting a ping pong table. So when we got home from the trip, my brother and I hatched a plan. You see, we had a couple of months before my mom's birthday, and we realized that that would give us just enough time to save up and to buy her a ping pong table and a very nice ping pong paddle. And so after planning for months, the day before my mom's birthday came. And on that day, we snuck out, we borrowed a friend's truck, and we went and bought the table. And then we stored it at another friend's house because it was going to be a surprise. Even our dad didn't know about it. And so that night, we set our alarms for 4 a.m. And when they went off the morning of Mom's birthday, we got up, we snuck out of the house, we went and picked up the table, and then we brought it back, and we set about putting it together in my parents' basement before either of our parents woke up. We had to move furniture, but we eventually got it all put together and all set up. And then we decided we had a little bit of extra time, and so we went out and got donuts, thinking we're going to bring Mom breakfast in bed. Well, when we got back, it was probably 6:30 a.m., and our dad had woken up, and he'd discovered our secret, and with a smile, he just looked at us as we walked in the door and said, "You guys have been busy." So then eventually we woke Mom up, and then we gave her what she thought was her only present. We'd wrapped up the ping pong paddle. And she loved it and started gushing about how amazed she was that we'd remembered her love of ping pong from months earlier. And she's like, "This is so thoughtful. I can't believe you got this for me. Now I'll be able to, find a table somewhere and play and have my own paddle, and it's going to be great." And so then with a smile, we said, "Well, Mom, can you come downstairs? There's sort of another gift that we've got there that, well, it's kind of big, and we didn't really want to bring it up and have you open it in bed. So can you just come downstairs?" And she's like, "Okay." So groggily with her tea in hand, she followed us downstairs and opened the door and found, to her surprise and delight, her real present, the table that we had bought secretly and put together that morning. That began a season for our family of playing ping pong almost every day together. We played one-on-one, we played doubles. Dad was known for his aggressive playing style, slamming the ball past slower opponents. Mom was known for her patience and her defensive skill, no less competitive. We bonded over learning new strategies and skills as we learned how to put spin on the ball and what to look for when playing against others. We laughed, we worked up a sweat. They were great years, and it's still, to this day, probably the best gift that I've ever given anyone for a birthday or for Christmas. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about the difference in these two stories. First, the reactions of the gift receiver were noticeably different, weren't they? When I got my brother a board game that he wasn't interested in, he was polite, he was kind, but even my adolescent brain could tell that he was a bit disappointed. On the other hand, when our mom discovered that we'd secretly bought, transported, and put together a ping pong table in the basement, she was stunned, amazed, and delighted. She was also a little confused at how we'd gotten it there, because the gift showed that we were paying attention, even when she didn't know we were listening. It also showed that we were pretty good at sneaking around in the middle of the night, which, for better or worse. The reactions of the gift receiver were different. But the effect on the gift giver was also different, wasn't it? When I bought my brother something that I wanted and that he had shown no interest in, I was disappointed in his response and later embarrassed and honestly ashamed at my selfishness and thoughtlessness. But when my brother and I got my mom the ping pong table, it was a joyful experience for everyone, and it remains a memory that brings a smile to my face whenever I think about it. The point is this. When we give something that we haven't put time or thought into as an afterthought, it's far less impactful and meaningful than when we give our best, both for the receiver and for the giver of the gift. This is true in the gifts that we give other people. It's also true when we're giving gifts to God. Probably the oldest story in the world that makes this point is in the biblical book of Genesis, chapter 4, starting at verse 1. Let's look at it together. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. And then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." And now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you, and you will be a restless wanderer on the earth." There is more that can be written and said about this passage than can fit into a single sermon. But I want to point out just a couple things that should directly impact our understanding of stewardship, giving, and generosity. The first thing that's important to understand as we read this passage is that giving is first introduced in the Bible as an act of worship. Our English word worship comes from the Old English word worthship, which simply meant to proclaim and give worth to something that you consider precious and extremely valuable. And so this passage is about Cain and Abel telling God how much he's worth to them by giving him back some of the resources that they've been blessed with. I don't know if you've noticed this, maybe you have, but we try and reflect this attitude at Sanctuary whenever we talk about giving our tithes and offerings. We usually say or write something along the lines of, "We don't pass a plate here at Sanctuary, but we do believe in worship through giving." That's because giving or tithes or offerings are not primarily about supporting the ministries of Sanctuary. Certainly, yes, that's an important byproduct, but it's not the main reason that we encourage giving. The key reason why we encourage giving at Sanctuary is that the Bible says it's one of the major ways that we worship God and grow as believers. That pattern of viewing giving as a key component of worship starts here in the 4th chapter of Genesis and is repeated over and over throughout the Bible. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to point out about this passage. The second thing I want to point out about this passage is that firstfruits are introduced as the ideal or best pattern for giving. The idea of firstfruits is explained in one Bible dictionary like this: the concept of firstfruits derives from God's creation work. Because God created everything that exists, all of creation belongs to Him. Consequently, that which is first and best belongs to Him and is to be given to Him. One of the key foundations for the idea of stewardship and giving in the Bible is that everything is God's already. We as humans, we're not owners, we're stewards. It's not our stuff or our money. We're just entrusted by God to manage what is actually really His. And this is why selfishness and greed are such a big deal throughout the Bible, because it's basically people thumbing their noses at God and saying, well, I did this on my own and it's mine. But to that, God replies, but who gave you your ability to make money? Who made your brain? Who gave you your body? Who created the natural resources that you've used? Consider what God says to the Israelites in Deuteronomy 8 as they're preparing to enter the Promised Land after being led out of Egypt and cared for by God for 40 years in the desert. He says, when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land He has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe His commands, His laws, and His decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Offering firstfruits is a way of acknowledging God and reminding ourselves that none of us got here on our own. Yes, we may have worked hard for our wages. Yes, we may have fought through incredible difficulty and overcome obstacles to get where we are today. But at the end of the day, it was God who gave us the strength even to do that. This is why this first fruits idea is why many Christians practice tithing, that is giving 1/10 of their income to a church, by making it the first check that they write when they get their paycheck, or the top item in their budget line. That's their way of ensuring that their offering is the first fruits. It's the best. It's the first of what they've received. And most people who do that find that they don't wind up missing that money because in their view, it was never really theirs. It was never really in their bank account. And so it's easier to give. It's a lot easier to give that way, I've found, rather than waiting until the end of the month, seeing what you have left over, and then trying to give out of that. Many folks I've talked to who do that find that often in that method, there's more month left over at the end of the money than money left over at the end of the month. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do it that way or you're not a good Christian. The New Testament only says that Christians should give generously and with a joyful heart. And so I take that as the key command that we should follow. But the patterns of giving that are set up in the Old Testament give us something like best practices. They show us principles that help to make giving more generous and more joyful. And so giving first fruits, giving from the top of the pot rather than the bottom, is presented in this passage as the ideal. This is the best or even the most practical pattern for us giving back to God from what we've received. The third and final thing that I want to point out is that the attitude with which we give is as important as the gift. One of the reasons that God wasn't pleased with Cain's gift was the attitude with which it was given. Cain's attitude toward giving is revealed most fully in verses 5-7, which read, "But on Cain and his offering, he, God, did not look with favor. And so Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast?' If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. What this shows us is a picture of a young man who was more concerned with what he got out of the giving than what God got out of the gift. And when God didn't love the gift, when he did not look with favor, Cain got angry. I wonder, have you ever had someone give you a gift like that? Or have you ever given a gift to someone like that? Where they give you something that you didn't ask for and don't really want, and it reveals that they don't know you very well, and then they get mad at you for not being appreciative enough of the gift. When that happens, it's because the gift is all about the giver. It's about them getting a pat on the back, or you owing them a favor, or just about them feeling good about themselves. And that's what Cain was doing in this passage. That's what's so problematic. And that sort of gift isn't worship. It's not first fruits. It's not true generosity. And it doesn't lead to deeper and deeper discipleship and Christ-likeness. So what's the takeaway for us? What invitation is God speaking to us today? Well, first, I'll tell you what it's not. The message is not, give a bunch of money to the church or you're a bad Christian. I desperately hope that you don't hear that. And if my words have at any point unintentionally communicated that, I'm sorry. That message has unfortunately been heard too many times by too many folks in the history of the church, and that's not my heart or the heart of anyone in sanctuary leadership. What I do hope that you're hearing is that giving God our best with a joyful spirit is a great way to worship God and to grow in faith. I hope you hear that stewardship is about more than just writing a check each week or month, but that it's one part of a life that declares, God, you're worthy of everything. And so I give back to you what is already yours with thankfulness and with trust. I hope that you're hearing that giving God our first fruits, the best of our time, our talents, our gifts, even, yes, our finances, is a way to grow in your faith and to demonstrate your trust in God. That it's a way of rejecting materialism and selfishness, a way of honoring God and recognizing that everything good that we have is a gift from God. And I hope that you're hearing how much our practices of giving and stewardship reflect our attitudes and our desires. And I hope that you're motivated to get to know God better and to examine your heart so that you don't wind up buying him a lame Star Trek game and then regretting it for 30 years. God is worth getting to know, and he's worth being generous with. Truth be told, he is always going to give far more to us than we're able to give to him. And so may you experience and reflect God's generosity with every person that you meet this week. May you experience it for yourself, and may you give it to others. Amen.